It was just so confusing what went with what and what we could apply to what. Because, I mean, there was a couple of them in there that wanted to find him guilty of something. And after hours and hours and hours of deliberating over the law and reading it over and over and over again, we decided there's just no other place to go.
Because of the two options you had, second-degree murder or manslaughter, you felt neither applied. Right.
Well, because of the heat of the moment and the stand your ground. And he had a right to defend himself. If he felt threatened that his life was going to be taken away from him or he was going to have bodily harm, he had a right.
So even though it was he who had gotten out of the car, followed Trayvon Martin, that didn't matter in the deliberations. What mattered was that those final seconds, minutes, when there was an altercation, and whether or not, in your mind, what the most important thing was, whether or not George Zimmerman felt his life was in danger.
Well, that's how we read the law. That's how we got to the point of everybody being not guilty.
So that was the belief of the jury, that you had to zero in on those final minutes / seconds about the threat that George Zimmerman believed he faced.
That's exactly what happened.
So whether it was George Zimmerman getting out of the vehicle, whether he was right to get out of the vehicle, whether he was a wannabe cop, whether he was overeager, none of that in the final analysis mattered. What mattered was those seconds before the shot went off. Did George Zimmerman fear for his life?
Exactly. That's exactly what happened.
And do you have any doubt that George Zimmerman feared for his life?
I had no doubt George feared for his life in the situation he was in at the time.
Well, let's get some thoughts on this juror and the others too. Alan Tuerkheimer is a jury consultant, joins us now from Chicago. Alan, first of all, what just stands out to you most about this juror after hearing Anderson's interview?
Sounds like they took a really nuanced approach. They were very careful. They took their job very seriously. They looked at the law. Going in, there was a split. 3 wanted to find George Zimmerman guilty of something, and 3 didn't. So they looked at the law, they read it through, and then they focused on the justifiable homicide part about looking at the circumstances surrounding the deadly force, and ultimately they believed that he felt that the threat was real.
Yeah, a lot of people initially were curious or found it interesting that this was an all-female jury. Was that significant to you at all?
It wasn't significant. Men have the same experiences as women in terms of being sympathetic, having concerns about neighborhood watch types. If anything, I think women might have been a little more critical of George Zimmerman in what he did prior to the altercation with Trayvon Martin. So I don't think gender really mattered too much. I think it had to do more with some of the experiences, some of the attitudes that these jurors brought with them. One of the jurors was a safety officer. Another one told her kids not to go out late at night because of this case. She used this case as an example of bad things that can happen. And so I think those are some of the things to look for. One of the jurors had a gun, a concealed weapons permit that was lapsed. So I think those things matter more than gender.
Yeah, you learn anything from that interview about how they saw the law? Was it confusing to them? Was it clear to them in the end? What was your take?
It was confusing to me after I read it the first time. There were sections on justifiable homicide, excusable homicide. There were parts in it that talked about the killing being an accident. There were parts that had to do with whether or not this took place in George Zimmerman's dwelling or house. So none of that mattered. And so I can understand why it was him. So they did read it carefully. They selected a 4-person. They found that they were initially split. And so that's when the personalities really mattered. Some of the jurors, the pro-defense jurors, clung to their beliefs more, and they were able to persuade the others of their point of view ultimately.
And when it comes to this juror, you know, a lot of people in the wash-up sort of felt that she was, you know, I don't know, connected in a way to Zimmerman. She said that his heart was in the right place, stuff like that. Did you find that unusual? Or when a person goes through a trial like this, they're obviously, well, their job is to take a position, isn't it?
Sure, some bonding always takes place, whether or not it's to a defendant, a victim, victim's family, someone who doesn't take the stand, as we saw here. She was a pretty strong pro-defense juror, but she did say things. She said that he was overeager. She said that he didn't use great judgment. So I don't think she was unduly connected to George Zimmerman. I think she was pretty fair about it, as most jurors are. I think she was fair about looking at the evidence, assessing the witnesses, and then in her mind, just figuring out what happened and then looking at the law, applying it to the facts, and then rendering a decision.
And in the broader picture of jury selection, in your expertise, what's the most important thing you're looking for from either side of the case? I mean, everybody gets to knock a couple back, and what are you looking for?
The dynamic's the most important thing, but if I just back it up and can get two most important things, you want to see the experiences, the attitudes that jurors bring with them, because that affects how they interpret the evidence that's presented to them. But also, you want to see how they're going to be in deliberations. Are they going to be a leader? Are they going to convince others of their perspective? Or are they going to be a follower? Are they just going to let the others steamroll them? And there's all this ground in between. Some are a little of both. So that's what you really want to look at. Is this juror going to be on your side? And is this juror going to argue your case in deliberations? And are others going to go along with it? Because some cling to their perspective really forcefully. And as you saw here, a 3-3 split turned into 6 unanimous verdict in favor of George Zimmerman.
Alan, thanks so much. Appreciate that. Alan Tuerkheimer is a jury consultant there in Chicago. Thanks so much. All right, well, the nation's top law enforcement official weighing in on George Zimmerman's not guilty verdict, and many people are eager to hear what he is saying. We're talking, of course, about Attorney General Eric Holder. He'll be speaking this afternoon at the NAACP convention in Orlando, which is going to be a significant audience too. That civil rights group has almost 1 million signatures on an online petition that urges the Justice Department to take action against Zimmerman. People insist that he racially profiled